38 cents a gallon to 55 cents a gallon in months. Increased by 50% in a matter of months, okay? So today we say that's the good old days. The 50% increase in fuel for a farmer in the 70s was a very big deal. Also came back to an agricultural crisis because we were so dependent upon fossil fuels, nitrogen fertilizer in particular. Those prices had also skyrocketed. So farmers were suffering very directly from the inputs that they had become reliant upon in the previous 20 or 30 years. Also, interest rates were sky high at that time. There was an embargo on exports to a certain country called Russia because they had invaded Afghanistan. So we quit sending food to Russia. Food as weapons, you know. Kind of was a, seemed to be kind of a disconnect there. And farmers were basically, they were going broke. And they were committing suicide across the country. You know, we were in a farm crisis. Also, we were chemically addicted. On my farm and most farms across Montana and across the U.S., we were highly dependent on commercial fertilizers, but also on herbicides and in some cases pesticides. When I moved back, numerous farmers of my father's age either had died, they were dying, or they were going to die of lymphoma-related cancers. They talk about community impact. There was a community impact of industrial agriculture. The farm policy at that time, Earl Butts was the Secretary of Agriculture. He announced it publicly. The policy is get bigger, get out. And farm programs supported that. In those days, the subsidies went directly to people who grew export crops, primarily corn, soybeans, cotton, and wheat. And of course, Montana being basically a prairie state, for us it was wheat. And it was kind of wall to wall, fence row to fence row. On the farms it was wheat, and pretty much across eastern Montana was wheat. Monocrop wheat and monoculture, across broad scales of agriculture. And there's a lot of issues with doing that. There were only one or two places to sell that wheat that we harvested, one or two elevators in these country towns, all across the Great Plains. Farmers did not set the price. They were price takers, not price makers. Those are the above ground challenges. Below ground, we also had challenges. The over application of nitrogen fertilizer plus over cultivation meant that a lot of family wells, community wells, were polluted with nitrogen fertilizer. Same to some degree with the runoff. Additionally, when my grandparents homesteaded in about 1900, the organic matter was about 4% in that native prairie soils. And by the time I moved back in 1976, 75 years later basically, that organic matter had decreased to about 1%, and in some cases less than 1%. Okay, so we had above ground problems, we had underground problems. The question is, what do you do about that? We were on a treadmill, and St. Francis of Assisi gives the advice, well, the first thing you do is the necessary, and then you do the possible, and before you know it, you've done the impossible. And I think visiting the co-op today, meeting the folks in this room, you can relate to that. The first thing you do is the necessary, and then you just do what you can do, and then sooner or later, you have upper valley co-op. So the thing was, get off the treadmill. That was kind of the message. That was what was necessary. Reduce as much as possible use of fossil fuel, reduce dependence upon nitrogen fertilizer in particular, other farm chemicals, look at different crops to grow, and look for different markets to sell them in. And in the whole process, be involved in rebuilding that soil resource that had been depleted in the generations and two before. So that's pretty much the story of this little business that three friends and I started in 1986, And, what I'd like to do is, I'll get this back, loaded up, let's see, buddy, help doing this.
Get powered off.
Just
It went-
says powered off. The screen powered off.
I think we need to get rid of this. We need to get rid of this thing.